So what's going on? What's
The second
preoccupying your
question.
precious thoughts?
The second question is, I asked this to another like thing like this, and it's generally, avoided kind of. So it's a
Mhm.
philosophical question. The question
All
is,
right.
do we as humans, as Muslims,
Mhm.
need bad things to exist and happen because an ecosystem needs to what's the word? An ecosystem needs to exist in which we can have the possibility of committing good deeds.
Wow. In the sense that is there a is it necessary for there to be evil and harm in the world for us to do good?
Yeah,
Is that
because I personally don't believe that if it was all good, then there would be no, action for us to take. So there would be no quote
hmm.
unquote accumulating good deeds.
Yeah, I guess the question is that you see, could there be any good if all was good?
Yeah, exactly.
Because by definition, it kind of flattens it out.
Hmm.
Because then there couldn't be any good if all was good, in the sense that it has nothing to distinguish it from anything else. So it would just be. It
Yes,
couldn't be uh, distinct, and thereby, by extension, it couldn't be called goodness because it would just simply be called being
it
because
would
it would
just be,
just
yeah.
be. Yeah, it would just be a state of being, and there would be nothing contrasting. So yeah, I from a philosophical perspective, I feel yeah, um, things true. We can only understand it in contrast to things which are not good.
Yeah.
We can only understand goodness by contrast. True, I true that's I would feel is a given. Yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
cool. And another thing, a lot of I guess Sunni Muslims, if you will, just the general majority,
Sure, sure,
right,
sure,
are
sure,
afraid
sure.
to answer. So maybe you can just quickly answer this: is would God in the Islamic jurisprudence in any of them be considered infinite? I know he's considered eternal, but is he considered infinite?
Wow. Okay. Um, you know what? Shed some light on that for us. That how are you differentiating between eternal and infinite?
So for me, infinite would be for something to be truly infinite, it has to be all encompassing. Because for something to be infinite, it has to take all possible, it has to fill all possible areas of space that it can possibly fill, and beyond that. So if something
Hmm.
was a truly
So
infinite
not just
thing,
we're not speaking. So basically, it's not temporal. We're not talking about that. I mean, that's not the object of focus.
mhm,
Um, it's it's everything being.
yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah. So right, I feel okay. So here, hmm, I feel it gets tricky for
yeah,
people because in one sense, some Muslims would feel yes, that um, you see, because Allah is the ground of being,
yes,
and from His being, and by His being, any other being can only contingently exist. So, so it's not, so it's not to say that He is the first in a series of movers, as is the Aristotelian way in the Kalam argument,
yeah,
but more so that he's the ground, the necessary ground of being from which being emerges, and by which being emerges. So, what they call in Aqidah, wajib al-wujud. So, that's interesting because from there it stems to, hmm, so, right, does God, so do we exist kind of, I don't know if it's, see, because words are tricky.
Yeah, you can
It's in a
really,
way to
yeah.
say that, do we exist in the mind of God, so to speak? So are we, obviously we exist in the mind of God. It's not to say we are God in the sense that we are God in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sense. They don't say that. So this is, I guess, where you had people speaking of Waḥdat Al-Wujūd, or the non-duality of being. And they argued that ultimately just God exists and nothing else actually exists in comparison to God's existence. But that's not to say, you see, this was believed by many mystics of Islam, of Sunni Islam. Many of the great mystics kind of held to Wahdatul Wujud. Yeah, and other people, you see, the problem with Wahdatul Wujud is people can't understand it because we have no frame of reference to understand it. Because we can't understand non-duality. There is an ineffability about non-duality. So it becomes very, because when you explain that you are a part of everything, yet you are still distinctly you and not the other, but you're not the other also. It becomes nonsensical.
Yeah, yeah.
So people don't understand it. So they, and as the hadith says, or as the commonly transmitted, popularized hadith, that "An-nasu a'da'un lima jahilu." People easily become opposed to that which they do not understand. So you see, the thing about this Wahdatul Wujud, or this, the mystics said that you can only understand it by dissolution of the ego, that the ego must undergo an ego death, and then you must go through a fana. They had this concept of this annihilation of the ego, the perishing of the ego, fana, filla. And concerning God, or in relation to God, there is fana. And then what is left is al-baqa. You go from this transition from fana to baqa. Now, this is very mystic speak. And obviously to the kind of calm, logical mind, the mathematical, or the to that mind, it sounds like gibberish. It can't compute it. It doesn't understand. It can understand the words, but there's no meaning to it. So yeah, so this is why it's often rejected by most people, because they can't. And then what they resort to is a kind of compartmentalized, a kind of structuralized theology to respond. And I guess that makes more sense for general people. To me, like, I understand where the structural theology is coming from. It's saying, look, this is how God is. This is because it's being put into words because common people can understand these basic words. To me, that the mystic approach, I also understand that. I feel that is also incredibly invaluable. But I also understand that most people will not understand that, because it is something only experiential. They would say it's for the people of dhawq, people who've tasted it only can understand it. So I feel both parts have they contribute invaluably to the discourse. And your common person will not, if you try to speak this to him, they wouldn't understand it. So they would just be averted. And the hadith says that hadithun nas qadra uqulihim. You speak to people in a way that they understand. Atuhibbu an yukadhab Allah wa Rasul. Do you wish that Allah and His Messenger are denied? Because there's no point speaking in mystic speak to people who have not, this is experiential. So it's like saying the taste of an apple. Now, you can't really put it into words, if you, no matter what word you say, is sweet, or is it like this? I mean, sweet like what? Sweet like sugar? Sweet like this? It does, unless you just taste the apple, you'll never really understand the taste of an apple. So you can't never really explain in words the taste of an apple. So this is an experiential path for people who end up or find themselves on that path. And this is the normal structured path of saying, well, no, this is simply put, and this is how we understand God. We understand God through these arguments, and God is these things in this list, and he's not these things, and that works. Sure. Yeah. And people that refute it, sometimes you get refutations going on. I mean, you don't really get refutations from the mystics that way, but you get them this way towards the mystics. And they'll say things like, well, if everything is ultimately let's say if everything is they will say, like, let's say, because you see, they say that, well, if God is everything, but the mystics are not truly saying that, though. So they say, well, if God is everything, like there's a common response that is made sometimes, especially by the Salafiyah, for example, or some of the Salafiyah. They will say, well, if then God is in this apple, and when I eat the apple, I've eaten God. And so, and that's obviously a very silly, infantile kind of misrepresentation of that argument. I don't think nobody says it like, nobody believes that. So you're just refuting something which nobody believes. I guess it's more akin to saying, I don't know, they're not exactly saying this either, but a modern version would be that, I guess it's more akin to saying, well, are we in the mind of God? Well, if we exist in the mind of God, we all still exist, but are we in the mind of God? So I guess they didn't use those words, but their arguments are more akin to that. What they're saying is God is the ground of being. It doesn't mean that other things don't be in their entity. So they do exist, but it's more like a game that doesn't have any true existence, but it has an existence as far as we're concerned. So they would say, Allah says this world is that it is a distraction from what is reality. But it's okay. Like, just as I guess our physics would say that, you see, in this world, there are really no sounds, no colors. There are no tastes. Nothing like that exists in this world. It's just in our mind. Like, color doesn't actually exist. Neither does sound. Neither does smell. Neither does taste. It's all simply in our minds. But we couldn't imagine a world like that. So obviously, Allah is addressing us with ways that we understand, not how the world actually is. Because if Allah was to address us with the world how it actually is, He would address us about a world that has no color, that has no. But He doesn't. He addresses it with color because we see color. So yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I can. So I guess to quickly add on to that is, with you saying that, would it be against Tawheed to say that God is infinite?
I would say, would it be against Tawheed? I would say that there's two ways to look at that. If you're looking at it from theologian speak. So the theologians are the Muslim scholars of Aqidah. Because there's a big distinction between Aqidah and Iman. Aqidah is creed and Iman is faith. So we don't have any patrons or scholars or wardens or officials of faith. We have of creed, scholars of creed. Faith is not it's kind of in its way, it can't be captured. It's a spirit. It's not something which can be put into words in that sense. People say, well, okay, creed is a list. Scholars have designed creed. So according to the theologians, that I would feel generally, I would feel probably most, if not all theologians, or definitely most, let's at least go with most just in case there's some, that would clearly say that's kufr.
Yeah.
So most theologians would say that's disbelief, and it goes against, because you see, in creed, they have this creed in there that to refute Christianity, they say, well, God cannot become incarnate, and to be incarnate is to come into his creation. So they say, well, God can create creation, but he can't come into his creation. So that's the angle that they're coming from. Therefore, they would all, if not all, maybe I don't know, maybe some people will say, but maybe there's some from other sects that disagreed. So let's just go with most, if not all, would say that's kufr. Now, if you're not looking at theologians speak and you're looking at the mystics of Islam and from Sunni Islam, like Muhyiddin ibn Arabi and other people that followed him, like Rumi and all these people that were these mystics of Islam, they wouldn't see that as kufr. They would, in fact, Ibn Arabi writes in his tafsir, this Waḥdat Al-Wujūd, I mean, not the word, but this manifestation. But they're not seeing it. You see, they're not seeing it as God becomes incarnate. They're not seeing it like that. That's like a wrong way to see it. They're saying that only in actual, just as, you see, we see color, but color doesn't exist. Just as we see certain things, but they don't really exist objectively speaking. We just see them in our mind. So they would say, really, only God exists. All else existence is but an illusion. It's like a game that's been, it's there to us. It's like if we created a computer game, let's say. Now, computer games today are so graphically, overpowering, overwhelming. In fact, this just goes to show. I recently just shared this clip on my Insta story. It was of these two cars on this racetrack, and they were just skidding and they were maneuvering around each other so as not to hit each other. One was a BMW and the other, and it was just so perfectly executed. It was like, wow. And I shared the clip like, wow, that just blew my mind. And then I realized afterwards, it said, "Oh, did you realize that was a computer game?" I honestly, I could not tell. It looked so real. Now, so okay, let's say with our graphics, if we even let's say we keep improving the games by even 0.1%, 0.001%, there will come a point where it will become indistinguishable from reality. Now, let's say these characters in the game, we give them some kind of consciousness, some kind of quasi-autonomous consciousness that they think they're conscious, even if we know they're not, but they think they are. Because now people in games, characters in game, they have to eat, they have to get dressed, have to do things. So let's say this character in the game believes it's conscious, even if we know it isn't. You see, to the character in the game, everything is real. Like they would think that, and it is real. Mm-hmm. So from the character perspective, it is real. Everything that is happening, the people they are meeting, the interactions they are doing. It's not to say it isn't real for them. For them, it is real. Let's say they could somehow feel pain. They could somehow feel joy. They could, let's say if we keep improving, it's not difficult that we would reach such a stage where the characters have some illusory consciousness that they feel they are conscious. So, I mean, just considering the Lambda thing that was leaked by Google, where it's indistinguishable. If you read the interview, you couldn't tell. And that's the Turing test, isn't it? The test is if you're speaking on this side to a machine, you can't tell it's a machine or a person, it's passed the test. If a human can't tell, if I'm chatting to someone and I can't tell this is a machine, a bot, or a human, then it has passed the test. Because I can't figure, if I can ask it questions, whatever I want, and I still can't tell, I have to speak to 5 people and 2 of them are machines, and I don't know which one. And at the end, I can't figure it out. I get them wrong. Those machines have passed the test. Because you, as a human being, could not distinguish. So that's the Turing test. So the point is that now, so when these people were saying it's an illusion, they meant it like that, not in the sense that it is still real for us. So I would say, well, the mystics did allow for it, and the theologians, if not all, I'm assuming all said it was kufr. So that's the kind of difference you have.
That's for the theologian aspect. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
But cool, Zubair. It's been epic, yaar. catching up with
Just
you.
before I leave,
Sure. Okay.
I just want to leave with one quick thing. Is the video that piqued my interest a lot was when you correcting who Uzair was, Osiris, Uzair being
Osiris.
Osiris.
Oh
Yes,
wow.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So just quickly, have you ever heard of the theory that what's his name, Idris was Thoth?
I have actually.
Okay, good. Cool,
That's
cool,
very
cool.
fascinating because when I looked into that, I came across Idris being what they said Thoth, and in Arabic they wrote it as I think they wrote it as Thuth or something,
Yeah,
or
something really.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I think I can't remember now. They or Tahuth or something, but I can't remember. But they in Arabic they wrote it a bit differently, and they were saying because maybe he's the first person to scribe and the first
Yeah.
person to do. It's interesting because Idris also sounds like a kind of a Greek. It sounds like there's some influences along the way to add to the name.
Yeah.
Just the structure, Allahu A'lam. But yeah, it's because it's fascinating. We have no understanding of Idris alayhi
Yeah, nothing.
salam.
One interesting in the
Yeah,
Christian aspect of it, if we look at
yeah.
Christianity, they say Enoch lived 365 days. Sorry, years, right?
Oh,
And then
right. Okay.
he went to God. In Thoth's mythology, he was the god that created the 365-day calendar. So there is a correlation.
Oh, yeah. And there's yeah, I remember reading at the time. I mean, it's kind of, I'd have to revisit it, but they were showing a lot of correlations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, not a lot, but they were showing a few similarities between certain traditions stating Idris. Because from the Quranic and the pure Islamic perspective, there's very little. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the understanding is we don't even know where to place him in the
Mm-hmm.
timeline, except that he seems to be incredibly ancient. Like
Mm-hmm.
we just don't know where to place him, and there's nothing really mentioned. So surely the some Arabs at the time when the Quran was being revealed must have had some reference of Idris. This is why he's mentioned, because it would resonate with some people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we don't have that continuity to understand what they understood by it. So yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, the Osiris thing, I found it made more sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get people felt that, no, it's a bit far-fetched, but I thought, it seems to resonate because Uzair ibn Allah, that the early Jewish community, they had the kind of spirit of Osiris with them. It wasn't like it was more a because they were raised into it, it would have been difficult to distinguish. I mean, not to jettison it completely. It would have been a real struggle. And Osiris is that great, the epic deity that everybody loved and
Yeah.
everybody had this thing for. So it made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate this. Thank you very much for answering
Right.
like all the questions.
Shukran, Zubair.
I will
Take
see
care.
you
It's a
on
pleasure.
Patreon though.
Cool, man. I'll take care. Speak to you there. Much love. See you
Yes,
soon,
sir.
yar. Assalamu alaikum. Get back to
Wa
gaming.
alaikum
You
salam.
look like you were gaming away.
No, I just came home from work.
Oh, is that how you come home from work?
Yeah, just chilling.
Doing it. All right, man. All right. Take care. Much
So
love.
take
Assalamu alaikum, people. That was Zubair, just chilling, coming back from work in his gaming gear.